So, for those of you that don't know, Groningen is a little student city in the north of the Netherlands, and I wanted to share some clips I made there, because maybe the Netherlands is a really beautiful country. I've just gotten numb to it. Let me know what you guys think about the city. Anyways, I realized while trying to migrate a project for work from a desktop Java application to a web service that I don't really understand the client to server to database flow that most software relies on. Let me explain. I've been relying on Drizzle ORM and Django Python to interact with my database for too long, and that has made me a victim of something I often warn about on this channel. Too much abstraction is too little understanding. Do not take your frameworks for granted. Most people are familiar with the request-response cycle that a client and server use to interact. The client sends a request, the server processes the request and returns a response. Most of the time it uses the HTTP protocol, and it's stateless, meaning if the same client makes multiple requests, the server has no idea it's coming from the same client. Like most people, I knew this too. The part that I accepted as magic was when, for example, a NextJS server component just did this. Code that executed on the server just had access to the database. Just called db.users.getAllUsers, which uses a framework like Drizzle to query the database, and magically the server and the database had communicated. But how? Did the server and the database also use a request-response cycle? What I came to find out is that a database and a server communicate in much the same way as a client and a server do. In fact, the database is itself a server, and when the server sends a query, it becomes the client to the database. I think this is why so many people have a weak mental model of what the client and the server are. Their names get interchanged like crazy. For this video, the client is the browser, the server is a computer running your program in a data center, and the database is also a server running the database software also in a data center. So when a Next.js component runs a database query on the server, what happens under the hood is the server uses a database driver, like MySQL2, to establish a connection to the database. This connection happens using the TCP protocol, which HTTP also relies on. The database executes the query sent by the server using the database software that it's using and then returns the results to the server. Now that you know how a database and a server communicate, take a break and look at these clips I took at work.
Come on, cuz.
Oh god. I think most people have never seen a welding machine or a diamond cutter, so I thought I'd share. But now that I had a mental model for server-database communication, I could actually start coding. And here's the layered architecture I came up with in my Next.js project. Let's take a look at this actions and API layer first. If you don't understand Next.js server actions yet, check out my other video, the link will be in the description. But so here is our Next.js server action, which you can see by the use server directive at the top. And basically, if you guys don't know what it is, it lets you call functions that exist on the server from the client. That's basically a server action in Next.js. And here it accepts the form data that you can get from a user's form. So when the user submits the form, they basically fill in some inputs, and those inputs have names which we can then get on the server. So that's the first step of the server action. They actually get any data that the user submitted. So normally I didn't do it here, but normally what happens is you do some server-side validation. You make sure that the username or the password exists, make sure the user submitted them. And then if all is good, you continue. But if they didn't submit and there's some validation checks that didn't happen, then you can just exit early and kind of save your server from unnecessary requests because you know that the username and the password haven't been sent properly. So this layer in the architecture, the server actions and the API, they are going to be the only place in the application where I handle errors. So if an error happens on the database while it's querying, those will bubble up and they will be handled within these try-catch blocks that are in the server actions. So at least then I have a consistent way of dealing with errors throughout the application. Because sometimes you see in these applications, you get like nested try-catches. So you're try-catching in the database level, and then you're try-catching in the server actions, and then inside your actual components, you're also wrapping in a try-catch. That's just unnecessary. Only do it in one place, and any errors that are going to happen will be caught directly in server actions. At least that's how I'm handling it in my project. So once the error handling is done, we actually use that database object that's in the most inner layer. So the important part is that the server action here doesn't actually know about how any of this is implemented. It's just importing the database object and then calling a property that exists on it. So here we have the database from Migrato. This is a database that exists within our server. And then we use the user property, which contains all queries that are related to the actual user table. And then it says .login. And so in a bit, you're going to see how I basically wrap a query in a more readable name. So here, login just takes a username and a hash password and returns a user that it's related to. So if the user, then we do some page related logic. And what this is logic related to the page that Next.js server component is actually rendering. So here, if the user exists, this is the login page. So we're going to create a token, create a session afterwards, and then set that session in the cookie, and then actually redirect the user to the dashboard page because now they're logged in. And then we also, like I said, do the error handling. So that is the most outer layer. Those are like the core concepts of what my server actions, and this was a server action, but also my API will do if I choose to create route handlers for that in the future. Now let's take a look at the queries layer. Basically, it just exports a object that contains different properties that query the database. And in the most simple case, it just wraps a simple select statement, for example, select all the users from the user table, and it wraps it in a more friendly name, in this case, get all. This is a bit of a more complicated query. It selects a user that matches the username and the password, which I passed in as variables. So the point of the query layer is just to wrap your queries in more friendly names and also to have a central location where you're actually querying the database. So I know that in the future, if I need to add a query, delete a query, modify one, it can only be found in one place, and that's in this layer. It's in this object that's going to export all of those properties. And the nice part is that I export this object under a database object, which you're later going to see. And that makes it possible for me to just say, give me the user database or give me the user table with the login query and pass those in. And then the server action doesn't have to worry about the implementation of that. It can just have the luxury to call that method. And the last layer, which is also the most inner layer of the circle, is the actual database layer. And it's also the most simple layer. And what the database object basically does is it helps organize all of your queries under the table that they're operating on. So for example, all the user queries get put under the user table, and all of the user external queries get put under the user external table. And that just basically makes it all a little bit more readable when you're using it in your server actions. So here now I can say which database am I operating on, which table am I operating on, and what query am I performing. So it's just two abstractions that you can then use in your most outer layer. But yeah, that's it for today's video. Again, trying something new, a bit more of a vlog style video this time. Just always trying something new on this channel. Let me know what you guys think. I'm also looking for feedback. I've tried different series. I've tried a vlog style. I've tried a bit more tutorial style. And I'm kind of just seeing what you guys like and also a bit what I like to make myself. So yeah, this one was fun. Hope you guys enjoyed it.